If you're trying to become a web designer, you've probably seen 100 different roadmaps online, but here's the problem. Most of them only show you part of the picture. They might get you to a finished website, but then you're kind of on your own. After coaching thousands of designers, I've learned that the website itself is just the tip of the iceberg. There are actually 4 core skills that you need if you want to get paid more than just a couple $100s for a site. So in this video, I'm breaking down those 4 skills, showing you what actually matters with each one and how to start learning them right away. Are you ready? Let's go. First skill that you gotta develop is web development because it's kind of the foundation. There are just 3 core languages that every web designer needs to understand. There's HTML, which is like the structure of the website. So think of it like the framing of a house. It determines what's on the page and in what order. Then there's CSS, which is what makes that structure actually look good. So it's layouts, colors, fonts. That's kind of like choosing paint colors and flooring for the home that you're building. Then there's JavaScript, which is what makes the website interactive. It responds to a user's clicks, scrolls, all the inputs. It can power animations, but it can also give app-like behavior to any website out there. It's really powerful. By the way, I've made a workbook for this entire roadmap. It's a summary of everything that we're talking about today. That way you can come back to it, keep learning, and keep growing your skills. There's a link in the description. Now listen up, because this is where people accidentally add years to the process. They'll spend a lot of time learning more advanced JavaScript libraries like React, or maybe CSS frameworks like Tailwind. And yeah, if you want to create complicated web apps, go for it. But that path is going to take much longer to start making money, and honestly isn't necessary if you just want to build websites for clients. That's because most modern web designers don't build websites from the ground up with code. They use website builders. So your job really early on is simple. You just pick a builder and you build something. The builder I use is Showit. It's quick to learn, connects with WordPress, very flexible, but Framer and Webflow and Wix are all solid options as well. What matters most actually isn't the tool itself. It's that there are good beginner resources and you actually enjoy using it, or maybe you like the idea of using it, because there's always a learning curve that's a little frustrating. Even then, every builder has its limits. Eventually, a client's going to ask you to do something that that builder doesn't support out of the box. And that's where knowing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript really pays off, because that knowledge is going to set you head and shoulders above other web designers that skipped this step. The good news is that AI makes all of this much easier than it used to be. Tasks that once took hours can now happen in minutes. But AI only works as well as your understanding of these basic coding languages. I like to put it like this: knowledge of something doesn't mean you have experience in something. Basically, half of all coding is just figuring out why something isn't working. And the only way you learn how to do that is by actually trying to build something yourself. So the more fundamentals you know, the better prompts you write, the cleaner results you get, and the less time you spend just trying to figure out why something's not working. So don't skip the basics. Now, here's the problem with most roadmaps out there. They tell you to learn all this through things like courses or tutorials, and then you go on to build fake projects or personal projects, and then eventually find clients. The problem with that is that it takes 6 to 12 months before you ever make money, and I've seen so many would-be web designers stall out before you ever get to that final step. Here's what you're gonna do instead. Learn the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on a platform like Codecademy. You don't need to buy any courses. There's tons of free resources out there. But don't get stuck right here. You want just enough knowledge to be able to know how to target specific HTML elements so that you can customize either CSS or added JavaScript interactions. You don't need to know everything by heart. At max, this should take you 1 or 2 weeks. Then pick a website builder and just get familiar with it. This should only take you another 1 to 2 weeks. You don't need to know it like the back of your hand, just enough to be comfortable with it. Then after that, try as hard as you can to avoid fake projects. Instead, go out and try to get a real client. Your goal is actually to make your first project an actual client site. And if you can't get a client, only then work on a personal project or a fake website. I didn't even have my own website for the first year of web design because I was too busy with actual client work. So this is possible, it just takes a different approach. But you might be asking, Chris, how do I find clients if I don't have a portfolio yet? Fair question, but there's a way to do it without lying about your portfolio and also adding value to the project and the people that you're working with. Here's exactly what I did and exactly what I've seen so many other web designers be successful with. You reach out to people who already trust you, right? Friends, acquaintances, maybe coworkers, someone in your family, and ask them one simple question. Do you know anyone who needs a website or has one that could use an update? Because they're giving you a chance, you're going to give them a great deal, either through an incredible rate, like a fraction of what the cheapest web designer out there would ever charge them, or you exchange a service for a service. So maybe you build a landscaping company's website and they come and do your yard for you. Or you could do it for a list of leads. So a personal handshake between people they know that might actually need your service in the future. By the way, I've got a full breakdown of this method in another video. I'll leave a link in the description. On this first project, you're just trying to keep it really simple. Okay, so use a template. You don't have to start from scratch. Your goal is just to get a clean, functional site live as soon as possible. You're trying to get in some reps in the early days. And as a side note, you can make a small custom HTML, CSS, or JavaScript adjustment with those newfound skills of working with some web development tools. Then on every project, try stacking more skills that we're talking about today. You're not gonna learn them all at once, and that's okay. Just try to learn a little bit at a time, and eventually you're gonna get to the place where you got a lot of knowledge. After that first project, you're gonna realize something pretty quickly. Finished websites are great, but websites that tell a story and help people connect on a personal level with a business, that's where the money is. And that's where brand design comes in. Some clients are gonna come to you with their brand completely finished, and that's great, but you still need to know how to take whatever brand exists and extend it across the entire site. Other times, clients are gonna come to you with no brand or an almost brand, right? Like maybe they have a logo, but everything else is just really fuzzy. And this is where brand design really pays off. The designers who charge more aren't just building pages, right? They're shaping how a business is perceived. When a site feels on brand, clients don't just see it as just my website. They see it as an investment. And that's the difference between a $15,000 website and a $5,000 website. Brand design is like meeting someone for the first time. Within a few seconds, you kind of already have an impression of them based on the clothes they wear, maybe how they communicate, with their body language, with their confidence. But at its core, a brand is what businesses use to try and get people to connect with them on a deeper level. More than just, here's my product or service, do you want it? They're trying to get people to feel something about their business. And your job as a web designer is to make sure that that feeling is coming through loud and clear. On a website, your main tools for brand are colors, fonts, and images. These are your biggest tools for setting the tone on a site. All websites need a really strong color palette, but here's the rule that most beginners fight against. Simple is almost always better. Too many colors are hard to manage and makes the site feel chaotic really quickly. A solid starting framework looks like this. You choose neutral colors for the text and the background. Then you've got one main brand color and one accent color. In the web design world, this often shows up as the 60-30-10 rule. So about 60% of all the colors on a website should be those neutral. So browns, blacks, whites, grays, things like that. Then 30% should be that main brand color, and a final 10% should be the accent color. But here's the thing, the 60-30-10 rule is great to start with, but you don't have to stay there. Eventually you're gonna want, or maybe even need, to add more than just 4 colors. And that's great, but you can't just throw any colors together and call it good. They need to harmonize. Colors that harmonize have a real specific relationship on the color wheel, like analogous color palettes, which are colors that are right next to each other, or complementary color palettes, which are colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. Now, don't let this intimidate you. Even the best web designers will grab color palette ideas online, either from websites or places like Pinterest. You don't need to memorize color theory. You just need to avoid random choices. Now, text on a website does a lot of the heavy lifting. It's all over the place. It's probably 80% of what you'll see on a given website. So font choices matter more than most people realize. Now, there's a lot of font choices out there, but they kind of all fall into specific categories. And the main ones that you need to know are serif, sans serif, monospace, and handwritten or script. Each category carries a different personality with it, and that personality should match the overall brand of the site. But here's the thing that most web designers miss. A lot of great sites use just one font. I've seen the urge of a lot of beginning web designers be to put a ton of different font styles and a ton of different colors on their websites at the very beginning. But simple is almost always better. If you do use more than one font, you gotta keep it tight. 2 families is usually plenty, and 3 should be the absolute max. And when you pair fonts, the key is contrast. Fonts should feel intentionally different. So serif with sans serif with monospace. The issue is that when you start using fonts that are too similar to one another, it starts to feel a little unintentional. But even though color and the font choices that you pick are really important on websites, I don't think images get enough attention in web design, but mismatched or generic images can drag everything else down. There's a few rules that you want to follow when you're choosing images. First, they should fit the brand, right? So ask yourself, is this brand more professional? Maybe it's got a relaxed or maybe natural feel to it, or there's a high style to it, right? Like design. You also want to make sure that you stay consistent with the images that you choose. You should choose photos that don't have completely different lighting or completely different colors. In other words, they should all kind of look like they were taken by the same photographer at the same photo shoot. Then finally, you want to make sure that the color in the photos matches the brand color or the color palettes that you're choosing. If you've got colors that are just completely off from every other color on your website, it's gonna stand out like a sore thumb. Now, some clients are gonna come to you with their own photos, but a lot of times, especially when you're working with folks that don't have big budgets at the very beginning, you're gonna need to find photos for them. And that's where you go to stock photo websites like Pexels. And refining your eye for images that work really well with the website is gonna help the overall look and feel. So how do you actually improve at brand design? You do it inside real projects, right? So on your next website project, don't just roll with whatever the template gives you. Pause and ask, does this color palette actually fit the business? Most templates come with a given color palette, so don't just randomly choose a template. Figure out, does this match the style of this business? Do the fonts match the tone that we're trying to communicate, or do I need to swap them out? Do the images feel consistent and intentional? That mindset shift alone puts you ahead of most beginners. But you also want to get familiar with some brand design tools. What I recommend most beginners start with are platforms like Kittl or Canva. These are really easy to use and get started. Eventually, you're going to want to move over to the Adobe suite. So using Photoshop to manipulate images or Adobe Illustrator to manipulate vector graphics or SVGs. There's even Affinity, which is a free option if you don't want to go down the Adobe suite path. But listen, the tools aren't the skill. The real learning happens when you start paying attention. So as you work on a project, study other designs that feel similar to what you're building. Maybe look at websites in the same industry. And then notice, how many colors are they using on their website? Are they pairing fonts? Are they using a single font? Do the images feel cohesive? I'm constantly saving screenshots and examples that catch my eye. Over time, patterns start to jump out. And once you start to see the patterns, your decisions stop feeling random. That's how your brand design instincts form. But no matter how good the brand is, if a website is hard to use, people aren't going to stick around. In fact, they might rage punch their keyboard and invoice you for their wasted time. And that's where UX design comes in. UX stands for user experience, and it's all about a user's decisions or behavior. Where there is a little confusion is when people often say UX and UI like they're the same thing, but UX is actually different than UI. UI stands for user interface. So that's how the website looks, more of the visual design. UX is how people move through a site, how they understand it and know what to do next. I like to think of UX as the invisible instruction manual for a website. When it's clear, people move through the site easily. When it's confusing, it all falls apart no matter how good it looks. At the core of good UX is understanding the user's perspective. The problem is, as the designer, you're dealing with the curse of knowledge. The site makes sense to you because you built it. But if you handed it to a random stranger, they'd immediately run into things that make zero sense. Trust me, I've been doing this for a long time and it happens on almost every project. The best way to uncover those issues is always through real user testing. Now, you might think that user testing is only reserved for websites that have really big budgets, but it's actually really simple to do for cheap or no money at all. First, find someone that's not connected to the project and ask them to look at the website. Have them scroll through the homepage and just kind of think out loud. Tell them to say what they're looking at, say how it feels, say what they're wanting to go to next. And then at the very end, ask them to do a specific task. Either have them sign up for a call or maybe fill out a form. You're gonna quickly spot assumptions that you didn't even realize you were making. But here's the cool thing. This is also the best way that I've found to learn good UX design. You're gonna be dying on the inside because the user doesn't see that button that you thought was really obvious. And that pain will honestly be the best UX teacher that you're ever gonna have. But every time you do this, you're gonna get better. You're gonna start thinking like a user, you're gonna write clear sections, you're gonna simplify layouts, and that feedback loop is gonna help you to grow. One of the biggest pitfalls that you will almost always find problems with from that user testing are speed bumps and something that's called user flows. A website isn't a static poster. It's an interactive experience. You're not just building one page. You're creating a path for someone to follow from the very moment that they arrive or land on the website to the moment that they book a service or buy a product or whatever it is that we're trying to get them to do next. Think of user flow like a GPS for the website. Someone is trying to get somewhere on your site. And if that direction isn't clear, right, they're gonna get frustrated. And this is where visual hierarchy does most of the heavy lifting. Visual hierarchy is how you guide someone's attention with things like size or contrast or grouping. So it's what they notice first and then what they notice next and so on. Every time you land on a website, there's something that you noticed immediately. And that was intentional by a designer. They were trying to get you look at specific things and they used visual hierarchy to accomplish that. But if everything looks equally important, nothing feels important. And that's where user flow gets really confusing. A user's next step should always be obvious. And the best way to design that is by working backwards. So start at that final destination, like a checkout confirmation or a thank you page. And then you trace the path backwards until you get to the place where they entered the website. If there's some kind of dead end or confusion or hesitation anywhere along the way, you keep refining it until it makes complete sense. But none of that matters if you don't think of every user. And that's where accessibility comes into play. You gotta think of people with visual impairments or maybe motor limitations. Proper accessibility is a really big topic, but a few basics that every web designer should care about are this. Good contrast between the text colors and the background colors allows every user to clearly read what the text is saying. Just because it looks clear to you doesn't mean it passes. There are ratios that we're given that tell us when the contrast is safe. For small text, that's about 4.5 to 1 of a contrast ratio or 3 to 1 at the very lowest. Larger text can get away with a little bit less. An easy way to find text contrast on any website is to open up Chrome Developer Tools, and then you're going to want to select this icon right here. It's like a dotted box with an arrow in it. Then you can hover over any text and it'll show you whether that contrast passes the accessibility rules. But it doesn't stop there. Images should also include alt text so that screen readers can describe what's on the page. And your site should be easy to navigate by keyboard alone, not just a mouse. The cool thing is that when a site is really accessible, it's better for everyone. The main tool that every UX designer is gonna have to get really familiar with is a tool called Figma. It is the industry standard. In fact, a lot of web designers will use Figma for their brand design, for their graphic design, for everything that they do, just because it's so powerful. In Figma, you can mock up images that you're going to use for a website. So before you start to develop it or put it into your website builder. Designing first before you build or start to develop something can save you a lot of time and headaches. You can also create some really unique and powerful prototypes. Prototypes that might actually even feel and work like the actual website or an actual product. Figma is pretty easy to get started with, and there's some free plans so you don't have to pay for anything before you start really needing to go in depth with the tool. But oftentimes, clients don't just need well-branded websites with good UX. They need websites that actually move the business forward. And that's where digital marketing comes in. When it comes to websites, digital marketing has two jobs. The first is to get people to the website. So that's the traffic. Think of it like pouring water into a bucket. The second is getting those people to take action, like book a call, buy a product, maybe join a list. That's called conversion. So you're turning visitors into customers. A lot of beginners are going to skip this step at first, and that's understandable, but this is one of those things that pays off the earlier that you start to think about it, because you don't just want more water pouring into the bucket, you want fewer holes for that water to get out of the bucket. If people are landing on a site but leaving without doing anything, traffic alone is not going to fix that. But conversion and conversion rate optimization does. But here's the really cool thing. This is where web design connects directly to money. And the closer a skill is to helping a business make more money, the more that skill is worth to a client and the more that you can charge for it. So let's start with traffic, or getting more people to show up to our website. There's kind of two main ways to do that. The first one is paid ads like Google or Meta. And those work, but they're usually outside a web designer's role. I don't know a lot of web designers that do paid ads. The other is SEO. At some point in your web design journey, I can guarantee that you're gonna get asked this question: do you do SEO? SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it's how websites show up higher in search results when somebody types a question into Google. Now, a lot of people get confused about SEO. They think it's some kind of button that you press on the back end of a website as a web developer, but that's not SEO at all. SEO is actually a holistic strategy, and that strategy has three parts to it. The first is called technical SEO, and this is how the site was built, how it was structured, kind of the behind the scenes stuff. The second is content, or the words on the pages, maybe keywords that were chosen, and keywords are phrases that people put into Google. So you're taking those phrases and you're putting them inside of the copy on the website. And then finally, there's backlinks, or when other websites link back to yours. So they put your URL as a hyperlink on their site. And really, you want all three of these components dialed in and working well. But as a web designer, most of your influence is going to be on the technical SEO. Now, I know technical SEO might sound scary. It's so technical, but it really comes down to two questions. Can Google and people understand what your site is all about? And does the site load fast enough and work the way that it's supposed to? If you focus on these two questions, you're gonna be head and shoulders above most beginners. So let's start with this first question. Can Google and people understand what your site is all about? This mostly comes down to structure and clarity. And your job as a web designer is to make the point of the page obvious quickly, both for people and search engines. And that starts with a page title and a meta description. Now, you're gonna find the option to set both of these in most modern web builders. And if it doesn't, maybe it's not a good web builder to use. Both of these are the preview that someone sees in the search results. So when they're searching for something, they kind of scroll through all the list of the options that Google gives them. These are the things that people see first. So that's really what gets folks to click. And if those don't speak to what the page is about and do it in a motivating way, the click never happens and nothing else really matters. Then comes what's on the page itself. And this is actually what Google cares about more than even page title or meta description. Every single page on a website should have one clear topic, and your HTML should reflect that really clearly. Now, this all starts with headings. In HTML, headings are written as H1, H2, all the way down to H6. Now, you don't just choose headings because of their style or their size. They each have roles that send signals to search engines that are really important. Each page should have one H1 that clearly explains what the entire page is about. You don't want these H1s to be clever or cute, right? You just want it to be obvious, and you only want to have one. That is the only HTML element on a page that you don't want more than than one on. Then after that, you're gonna use H2s and H3s to break the page up into scannable sections. So think of this all like an outline. You've got your page title and your meta description, and that really says why someone should click or care about this page in the first place. Then you got your H1, which is kind of reconfirming that the click was worth it and telling everybody what the entire page is about. Then you got your H2s, which are the main sections of that page, and the H3s, which are the supporting points of these sections inside of those H2s. If someone can skim a page and instantly understand it, Google usually can too. And that's the overlap between good UX and good SEO. Okay, so that's the first question. Now let's ask the other one. Does the site load fast enough and work the way that it's supposed to? One of your jobs as a web designer is to make sure that you're not putting unnecessary strain on someone else's internet, because just because a site loads fast on your laptop doesn't mean it loads fast for everyone. So you gotta keep the sizes of images as small as you possibly can. And you do that through compression tools for images, or even by using modern formats like WebP images instead of massive JPEGs or PNGs. Look at this image as an example. One is full size and it's a PNG, and the other is a compressed WebP image. You can't really tell the difference. Now, I know it's a little unfair because you're looking on a video, but I'm sitting right here and I'm telling you, there's not much difference between these two. One of them is a few megabytes big and one of them is like 100 kilobytes. That's a huge difference and can definitely help performance. But performance isn't only about speed. The site also needs to do what a user expects it to do. So making sure that the layout or the content on a page doesn't shift suddenly when you're trying to click a button or read something. Super annoying. And that links go where they're supposed to go. If a page gets deleted or a URL changes and nothing gets updated on your end, that creates something called a broken link, which is where somebody clicks on a link, they expect to get to a certain page, but that page isn't there. And so it sends them to a 404 page. That experience is frustrating for people and a bad sign for Google. If a page does get deleted, because sometimes you just have to do that, you got a few options to make it where a user doesn't get sent to a 404 page. The first is you want to make sure that there's a redirect. And honestly, anytime you change a URL or anytime you delete a page, you want to make sure that this happens. So a redirect is when somebody puts a specific URL into a web browser, rather than it going to that page, it gets sent to a different one. Why do you always want to add a redirect? Well, there might be links out in the wild that are pointing to that page that got deleted. And if that person doesn't know about it or they're unaware of the fact that it got deleted, people are gonna be hitting that link on their website and it's still gonna send them to a 404 page. So this is just good practice anytime you're doing something like this. Most website building platforms and even some domain registrars have the ability to redirect old URLs to new ones right in their system. Another option on your own website is just to update the link. So if the page got changed or the URL got changed, just send them to the updated page. Finally, the other thing that you can do is just remove the link altogether. Like if you just don't want to send people to that page or a page that's just like it, just take it off. It doesn't have to be there, but make sure that that redirect is in place so that if other websites are still linked to it, it doesn't create a bad experience for the users. In all of this, Google's just trying to serve up the freshest content to people who are searching for things in their search engine. So a big part of technical SEO is simply just making sure that the site is actually getting attention and not just sitting there gathering dust. And some of the biggest signals that it's just sitting there and nobody cares about it anymore are those broken links. So that's one side of digital marketing, getting more people to the site through traffic. But what about getting them to actually do something once they're there? Because that's kind of important on a website. We don't just want people to come, we want people to take a next step, like buy a product. And that is where conversion comes in. And at a really basic level, conversion only works if people can actually take action, if there's actually something for them to do. So for instance, once someone decides that they want to buy the product, the website has to make that possible. And this is where e-commerce comes in. E-commerce is just a system that lets websites sell things. But as a web designer, you're actually not building a custom checkout from scratch. So take that off your shoulders. That's not your job. You're just choosing the right tool for the client and making sure that the buying process is simple and as pain-free as possible. There's two tools that you're gonna run into a lot as a web designer. The first is Shopify, and then there's also WooCommerce. Shopify is actually an all-in-one e-commerce platform. So you're not just using it to sell products, you're actually using it to build your entire site. It's really great for product-based businesses that have a ton of products. In fact, anytime a client comes to me and says, hey, we've got like 50 products we're trying to sell on a website, Shopify is the thing that I always recommend. And why is that? Well, it's really stable and it's really safe. Shopify has done a great job of making it a very good option for this exact scenario. The trade-off is flexibility. Basic design changes are actually kind of tough. There's a little bit of a learning curve with getting used to how Shopify works. And even then, unless you have some really good coding skills, you're gonna be somewhat limited. In fact, Shopify has its own coding language called Liquify. So not only are you learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript, you got to learn this whole other language. And because of all those things, this is not something that I typically recommend a beginner starts with. Another option is WooCommerce. WooCommerce actually runs on WordPress. And because of that, it's a little bit more flexible and customizable. But that also means there might be a little bit more to do. You're not just dealing with a single platform that's got it all there for you. No, you're piecing together solutions from different plugins. You might have to think about hosting. You got to think about updating those plugins and all the performance that's going along with that. This is a solid option anytime a client is already using WordPress. In fact, WooCommerce was made by the same people that made WordPress, so it fits together really nicely. Now, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but the good news is that there's a ton of resources out there, everything from plugins that you might be able to use or tutorials that might be really helpful. Now, those are just two options. There's a lot of others out there. And as you're kind of evaluating which one you might suggest to a client or trying to figure out which one you want to start learning, they need to have three things at minimum. The first thing is you've got to have the ability to add products. So take something that you want to sell online, put it into a product system so it displays on a website. From that, people have to have the ability to take that product and put it into a cart. That's kind of the flow of e-commerce. Somebody clicks add to cart, goes into the cart, and then after that, they've got to be able to actually make the purchase. And this is where the ability to connect to a payment processor is important. So a payment processor is what is actually taking money from the user. So it's something like Stripe or PayPal. If these basics are covered, you're probably fine. But once you add e-commerce into your mix of skill, everything changes for you as a web designer. Because at that point, the website isn't just a marketing tool, it's actually an ATM. And clients are much more willing to pay higher rates for websites that can do something like that. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most stores don't fail because they don't get traffic. They fail because people almost buy and then they don't. That's the holes in our bucket. And this is where conversion rate optimization comes in. At its foundation, conversion rate optimization is figuring out how to get more of the people who visit to actually go on and take that next step to buy, schedule, or sign up. And you do that by testing out different ideas. So sometimes those ideas might be, let's try a different headline on our product. Instead of it saying something that's more fact-based, let's go a little bit more motivation-based. Maybe you try different button copy so that add to cart, maybe it says something else. Maybe you switch up the page layout where the product image is on the right instead of the left. Or what about changing the entire flow of the checkout process? So instead of going directly from the cart to a checkout or payment page, they go from the cart to a suggested items page. Doing something like that can increase conversion by a good amount. But here's the catch. You don't actually know what's working from testing all this stuff out unless you measure it. And that's where analytics comes in. Analytics can show you a lot of things, but two things that are really important are which pages are getting a lot of traffic and what people do on those pages. In other words, the biggest two components of digital marketing. The main analytics tool that most web designers use is Google Analytics. In fact, I get every single one of my clients to set it up on their website if they haven't already. And if they have, I ask them to give me access to it. So why is this so popular? Well, it's free, it works with pretty much any website, and it's fairly straightforward to set up. So this is actually the Google Analytics account for my website, for the self-made web designer website. I'm going to show you some of the data on here and then talk about some of the most important stuff. So first here is this snapshot, and this is really helpful. So you can see down here that this is showing us all the stuff that's been happening within the last 7 days. Of course, you can click this drop down and turn it to 30 days or 6 months or whatever to kind of give an idea for different time frames. But the first option that we've got right here is our view count. This number tells me how many times a page on my website has been loaded into somebody's web browser. So that could be somebody came to the page and then went away for a few days and then came back and it refreshed. Or maybe they came to the page and then went to a different tab and then came back and it refreshed. So it's not necessarily an indicator of how many people are actually coming to my website. A little bit better of an indicator about how many people have actually come is this active users data. This isn't looking at page refreshes. This is looking at the user specifically. And then the next one right here is the event count. So how many times somebody maybe clicked or filled out a form, maybe they scrolled a certain degree. Kind of depends on some of the things that I've actually set up on the back end. But the most important part, especially for conversion rate optimization, is this guy right here. That's key events. Key events are actions that you've actually set up within Google Analytics. So you're telling it to watch for these types of events. We're looking at that and we're saying, hey, Google, anytime somebody maybe buys a product or fills out a form or maybe books a call with me, track that as a key event. If this number starts going up after you make a change to your site, then you know that you're moving in the right direction. You're not just guessing. So as you're testing out all these different options right here, if you start to see this number creep up, that means you're on the right track. Now, yes, there's a lot more to conversion rate optimization, but early on, don't let that overwhelm you. It's okay to stick to these basics. Offer to set up Google Analytics on a client site. See if you can add key events to track within that Google Analytics dashboard. Think through the site critically and see if you notice any big problems that would keep people from taking the action we want them to take. Even just offering to set this up for a client immediately makes you more valuable. That sends a signal to the client that they can trust you, that you know what you're talking about, that you're thinking critically, not just about getting a paycheck from them, not just about making their website pretty, but actually helping it to make them more money. And that means you can start charging more with every single project. But here's where most roadmaps fall apart. They teach you all the skills, but they stop right before the part that actually matters. Using those new skills on real client projects. But if you're still sitting there wondering how you're supposed to find clients without any real experience, I got a full breakdown of 14 different methods to find and land web design clients without any portfolio. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget, if you don't quit, you win.